What goes up must come down. Welcome to the Brand Breakdown. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Courtney.
And this is where we're going to track the rise and fall of big brands, from companies to celebs to pop culture phenoms and everything in between. Let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Brand Breakdown. This is season 3 of our hot goss show on the royals. Sometimes we break down brands, sometimes we break down royal families, and they are brands. Arguably, they are brands. So today we're going to be talking about what's going on with Prince Andrew. Oh, wait, what's going on with just plain Andrew? So here is our royal aficionado, Courtney. Courtney, welcome back to the show. We're so happy that you're back.
Hello, I'm happy to be doing this. So fun.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a cold day here in the South, and by cold I mean like 50.
Oh, it's pretty warm here.
And which Courtney
in
says
New England, it's 54. It's pretty warm.
Yeah, shut it. My blood is way too thin to be like doing this on the regular. So I want to get straight to the tea. Let's spill the tea, as they say, the British tea. So Courtney, tell us all about what happened this morning, because there's some release this morning. So let's hear that. And then we're going to circle back and find out how this all came to a head.
So this morning on a Daily Mail exclusive, an article was published saying that Andrew had 40 prostitutes brought to his 5-star hotel in just 4 days during a taxpayer-funded trip to Thailand. So I am wondering if this article coming out this morning is kind of what was the predecessor to what happened last night with the major bombshell from the king announcing that Prince Andrew would be having his HRH and his prince title revoked, and he will forevermore be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
I think that a couple of things. If the queen were still alive, I don't think it would have happened because she protected him, even though she did strip him of some titles early on. And I think that the king, who's been quite ill with cancer and many other things, and also trying to, modernize the monarchy so that his son can step in and have a smoother runway, is looking at that thinking, no, we don't want all this for William, and I don't want all this for myself. So I think that he is making a decisive move to really cut Andrew out of the picture, especially kicking him out of his own house.
Yeah, I think that I'm honestly really surprised about him getting kicked out of Royal Lodge, because when he signed the lease on Royal Lodge after the Queen mum died back in, 2001 or 2002, the lease was I believe it was a 75-year lease, and the terms of it were that he had to cover all of the renovation costs in order to make I was going to call it a palace. It's not a palace, it's a mansion. But in order to make the home habitable. And so he had to cover all of the renovation costs. He had to also cover all of the yearly upkeep costs of the residence. And those renovation costs that he privately funded from his own pocket were about $20 million. So that was considered kind of like a prepayment on the 75-year lease term. He forked out $20 million. He restored the property. That takes an expense off of the crown and taxpayer funds. And in exchange, he gets to live there for 75 years. And the lease was also entailed to his daughters, with the remainder to his daughters, so that, if he died, it at least would have transferred to them, so that they would have had a kind of guaranteed place to be. So I was surprised that Royal Lodge has gotten as wrapped up in all of this as it has, because people are saying, oh, he's living tax-free, he doesn't pay rent, which is true, but he essentially prepaid the rent. So I find it interesting that Royal Lodge was brought as far into this as it has been. It just, I thought that no matter what, he'd be staying there. I was really surprised that it ended with him being sent off to Sandringham, out in Norfolk, away from the city, away from Windsor, away from his daughters and his brother.
Well, and Fergie's getting kicked out, but the princesses are not losing their titles, which is good because
Mhm.
they don't deserve that. It's not their fault that their father is allegedly alleged. And I say allegedly because we don't really know, right? I mean, the
Right.
Daily Mail would probably get sued if what they're printing is improper, but I think they've been sued a lot in the past. So we'll just say allegedly he had 40 prostitutes and allegedly he had them in 4 day time periods. But, you know, I mean, who knows? But anyway, let's circle back to how this all got started. Can we do that? So in July of '86, Prince Andrew marries Sarah Ferguson, who's a commoner at Westminster Abbey. They become working royals. They're very close to the throne. They have lots of military titles and roles and lots of patronages. And they are the darlings because everyone loved that she was a commoner for the most part. But then, just
Mhm.
a scant 10 years later, they get divorced with their two little girls, in tow.
Mhm.
And for a while, everyone hated Sarah Ferguson, but then she did the Weight Watchers thing, and then everyone loved her again. And then they stayed super close, like they stayed best friends. And they both shared the Royal Lodge, which we just talked about. So then, 3 years later, in '99, Andrew says that he met Jeffrey Epstein through Ghislaine Maxwell, who is currently serving some type of sentence, we don't know, in a federal prison for trafficking, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So then, fast forward just a couple of years, and then he meets the girl that will ultimately be his downfall, Virginia Roberts, who then became later Virginia Jeffrey. Is that how you say it? Jeffrey?
I'm not sure how you say it.
Giuffre, maybe it's Giuffre. I'll have to look that up. So he meets Virginia Giuffre, who alleges that she was trafficked to Andrew in London when she was 17 at Ghislaine Maxwell's house, and that he had sexual relations with her. Andrew
Mhm.
has always vehemently denied this and says he has no recollection whatsoever of meeting her. But this is honestly the night that kind of becomes the center of the entire case later on. What say you of that?
So, um I okay. So recently Virginia passed away. She committed suicide. She passed away, and her book,
Which
she
is
wrote her
tragic, by the way, and
memoirs.
I hate that for
Yes.
her family.
Yes. Awful. She had obviously been she's had a lifetime of kind of mental health issues and like trauma and tragedy, and unfortunately that could not be overcome. Um but before this happened, she wrote her memoirs. And in her memoirs, which are coming out, I think they just came out like last week maybe, um she stated that she was trafficked to Andrew 3 times, not just once, not just that night in question. Um, and like you said, Andrew has always vehemently denied the allegations. He has said, absolutely not. I don't know this girl. Like, yeah, maybe I met her one time at a gathering, but one picture doesn't mean anything because, Andrew was a public figure. He did meet people, thousands of people a year probably. So taking a picture with one person at a gathering, he's saying, proves nothing because if every single person that he met and took a picture with said, this is what happened, like it would be ridiculous. So he says it's not true. I, until extremely recently, I've always kind of been on the side of admittedly being like every time, like I always say this with the caveat of like maybe I'm being extremely naive. But for as like smarmy and clout chasing and whatever as Andrew is, and extremely entitled and spoiled and pompous and whatever, I've always thought that this just kind of didn't track with his personality or like what we've kind of always known of his public persona, right? Like his daughters were about the same age as Virginia when all of this happened, which to me just added like an extra ick factor. He has always seemed like such a devoted father. His relationship with Fergie, like you said, they got divorced after they were married for 10 years. They didn't want to get divorced. It was not Like, they were basically told by the queen at that time, because it was around the same time as Princess Anne had got divorced. Diana and Charles were going through their stuff, and the queen was just unwilling to deal with any more scandal. And Sarah she had that photo of her, like, getting her toes licked or something. And the queen was just like, you know what? We're done with this. Like, you guys are splitting up, whether you want to or not. I don't want to deal with this. And like you said, Andrew and Sarah had always remained really close, particularly because they never really wanted to get divorced in the first place. In fact, they remained so close that Sarah still attended royal family gatherings, especially after Prince Philip died. Prince Philip was never a fan of hers, but when he passed away, she started being invited back to Christmas with the royal family. She was extremely close with the late queen. She moved back in with Andrew in 2008, and they have been living together since then. Um, so I always kind of thought the allegations that he had participated in, like, Epstein's sex trafficking ring didn't really, like, jive with what we knew about him. Now, conversely, that didn't mean that he didn't necessarily have sex with her, right? I never was like, "Oh, he didn't have sex with her," but I just thought maybe he met her and didn't, like, he was too kind of dumb to realize what exactly was going on. Like, he didn't just meet a girl at a party who was suddenly super interested in him. Like, maybe he didn't realize that the whole thing was set up, right? That, like, this girl had been procured for a purpose. Um
I think you're
so I don't
precious.
I
You're just
know. I
precious.
know. I say it with the caveat of, like, maybe I'm just being, like, way too naive about it, and maybe I'm just giving him far more credit than he deserves, but that's always been my thought until recently, until, like,
O-
this week.
Okay, so as you know, we've discussed this. I am 100% on the other side of this. And I think that Andrew knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what was happening with Virginia, who was 17, and he had to have been in his 30s. And in the memoir, which came out on the 15th, Virginia said that he believed that having sex with her was his birthright, so that he was entitled to have whatever he wanted. And that is what tracks for me, because I do think there is an enormous amount of hubris in the royal family in general. You know, I feel that way.
Mhm.
And I also think he had an enormous amount of hubris. Just even think about right, that it was his birthright.
Yes.
So in March of 2001, Virginia Roberts, then later Giuffre, says she was trafficked to Andrew in London. And Andrew said, no, that never happened. But then she says she was again trafficked to him later in 2001 in New York, and then on Epstein's private island. So these encounters are kind of part of a pattern that she later describes, and Andrew denied it all, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay. So then that famous photo came with him and his arm around Virginia, and he says he doesn't even remember taking that photo, or even if it's real. And I'm like, dude, AI was not around in that era, so
Right.
it's totally real. And so if he had like denied it then, let it go, done anything, but then in 2008, when Epstein pled guilty for the first time to, prostitution, and he's registered as a sex offender, Andrew did not cut him off, because then
Mhm.
later they're seen in 2010 walking around Central Park hanging out. Like,
Mhm.
what the heck, Andrew? Like, the guy's a convicted sex offender. You've been accused of being trafficked, of having a child trafficked to you through him. Why are you still seeing him in public where they can photograph it? At least see him in private, right?
Yeah.
Um, so ridiculous. So then the allegations break in 2015 when Virginia accuses him of being trafficked and tells the world. Well, Buckingham Palace stepped in, issued a huge denial, said no, 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 this isn't true, whatever, whatever. So for the next 3 years, it just goes and goes and goes and goes, and it keeps circling around and keeps circling around. Then
Mhm.
Epstein is arrested. So I guess in 2019, he is arrested on sex trafficking, and that Central Park picture from 2010 resurfaces. And then like a month later, he dies in jail, right? So, like, oh
Yeah.
God, now what are you going to do? So then, just a few months later, is this infamous interview, which I'm going to let you talk through with BBC Newsnight, where Andrew says he doesn't regret the friendship. He gives the Pizza Express in Woking alibi and says
Mhm.
he couldn't sweat, which I don't really know what that means. Maybe you can explain that. He's very defensive, he's not sympathetic, and the whole world turns against him.
Yeah, so the BBC interview was a really big misstep by Andrew, and it was apparently Princess Beatrice, his oldest daughter, who encouraged him to do it and helped him set it up because her thought was, okay, if you're really innocent, then like people need to hear your side of the story. And that was his side too. Like he was, presenting the facade or the persona or whatever of like, hey, I have nothing to hide. Like I will like ask me questions, I'll tell you everything. I've got nothing to hide and I'm not gonna just, hide behind press releases and like no comment statements. So he does this interview and like you said, he just comes off as so pompous and abrasive because he's being so defensive. And, on the one hand, I understand he's asserting his innocence and he's denying the allegations and all of that. But at the same time, he didn't come across as being sympathetic to anybody who has gone through something horrible. He didn't come across as any sort of person that you would want to necessarily side with. It was kind of like, the lady doth protest too much. He just
Oh
came
yeah.
across as like it was just off-putting. Um the thing
Well, he
about
again, he came across as pompous and entitled. He truly
yeah.
did.
Yeah, it just was hard to he wasn't likable. One of the things about doing an interview like that, whether you're promoting a movie or you're proclaiming your innocence against sexual assault allegations and sex trafficking is that you should probably try to appear extremely likable if you want people to be on your side and if you want people to support you. And he just, because he was so defensive and defiant, it didn't come across as relatable and likable. And
No,
one of
and
the
he wasn't
things
contrite.
No, not and I mean, I get from his perspective, he felt like he probably was thinking like, "Okay, I shouldn't seem too contrite. I shouldn't seem too sympathetic because I don't want to seem as if I am like remorseful about something I didn't do." But at the same time, it's like you should still seem empathetic to the person who is making the allegations because you don't want to seem like you are a monster who has no
Right.
feelings.
Right.
And who thinks that you're so above everything that you can't even believe you're being bothered by a situation like this.
Right.
And regarding the thing about not being able to sweat, that was because one of Virginia's statements had been that like she vividly recalled the experience and that he was like sweating on her. And he like his defense was like, well, I have a medical condition where like I can't sweat. Like I don't sweat. So obviously she is saying she remembers something that couldn't have happened, so it obviously didn't happen. Um
That
and
sounds
everyone
A, gross, but
yeah.
B, like a bunch of bullshit. Now, I know there is a condition like that, but I've never heard that he had that until just this moment.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. People like didn't I think he thought by bringing that up, assuming it's true, right? He thought that by bringing that up, people would be like, "Oh, that's his ironclad defense. Like he
Yeah.
can't sweat, so she must be." And instead, everyone was like, "What? That's really weird, dude. Like that's
Yeah.
not that's not
You
like the
sound like a
great point you
nutball.
think it is." Yeah, like it was just kind of like, ew, weird.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's gross.
and then the thing about Pizza Express was just it was so ridiculous because I guess, like, his claim had something to do with he couldn't have possibly been with her that day because his daughters had been invited to a birthday party at a Pizza Express in, Woking, whatever however you say it, and he made this the way he, like, made that statement was just about how he vividly remembered it because, like, Pizza Express is not somewhere he ever would have gone, like, it was something that stood out to him as so out of his norm because, a royal prince going to Pizza Express was just ridiculous, um,
Also
and
makes him
so
sound like a douche.
exactly, and people were like, "Okay, that's not." People were like, "Well, how do you remember this birth like, that you definitely weren't there on a specific day so long ago?" And he was like, "Oh, because I took my daughters to a birthday party that was, like, so ridiculously outside of my usual scope of where I would ever deign to set foot in." And people were like, "Oh, you're such a jerk. Like, you're so
Yeah.
pompous." Um,
Well, so the backlash on that whole interview was huge, and it was only 4 days later that he had to step back from public duties for the foreseeable future. Like, that
yeah.
that kicked off his exile right there.
Yeah, and I think that when he was trying to save his reputation, he really he really did himself no favors. One of the things about the royal family, and you and I have discussed this a lot, is that for better or worse, they are very big on the never complain, never explain. We're not going to address every single rumor. We're not going to make public statements. Um, and this is part of why, right? Like the more you talk, the more you fuel the fire, the more questions you bring up, and the more focus you put on something rather than just waiting for it to burn itself out. Now, would this particular instance have just burned itself out? Probably not, because there was an investigation by MI6. There was an investigation by the FBI. Virginia was going on talk shows and, telling her side of the story. The other Epstein survivors were starting to speak out. So, would this have just gone away? Not necessarily, but I think Andrew may have been able to just stay under the radar enough to, like, not make it dramatically worse. Like, he could have retained his titles, he could have retained his home if he had just initially stepped back from royal duties for an extended period maybe, and not done the interview. Instead, it got to the point where people would complain when they would see him with the royal family at private royal events. Like if they saw the queen out riding with him, they were upset. If they saw him at Christmas, they were upset. If they saw him at Easter, and these are not public events, these are not anything to do with the public, it's not an engagement, it's not part of charity. Like just seeing him with his mother would make the public furious. Um it
Mostly
was
because there
almost
was
as
no outcome. There was no outcome. No
right.
consequences, no outcome. I mean,
Yeah.
him stepping back from royal duties was not really an outcome. It was just a way for him to, like, get out of the public eye. Um, but there was no outcome. I understand. Like, he came across as like a dirty old man, and people didn't like it. And this girl was really hurt by it. And he refused to acknowledge his part in it whatsoever. So, I mean, I get it.
Yeah, and I think that the royal family did settle with her. Um,
Yeah. In
I bel
2022.
2022,
Yeah.
she reached a settlement with him in a civil sexual assault case. We don't know exactly how much that was for. It was estimated to have been about $16.3 million, 12 million pounds. And this was reportedly paid by the late queen. And one of the personally, I think one of the biggest points in Andrew's defense, if someone were to take that side, is that there was an investigation by the FBI, there was an investigation by Scotland Yard and MI6, and the conclusion of that was that there was no grounds to bring any criminal charges against him. He did settle with Virginia for millions and millions of dollars, and the thought by the royal family was like, we're going to settle this, we're going to make it go away. He's going to step back from royal duties, and everyone is just going to forget about this. With the caveat of like, this is a civil settlement. There are no criminal charges against him. There's no proof that he's committed a crime, not even enough proof to begin the proceedings of charging him with anything and like beginning trying to even indict him. So I always thought that was like the biggest point of his defense, right? Like they're investigating me and they cannot even pretend, like they can't even start a criminal proceeding. But people looked at that settlement and said, you're just paying her off and it's getting swept under the rug, and maybe this is like wrapping the royal family up in it even more, because now did you push a potential criminal charges away? You know what I mean? Like are you getting it like covered up by paying this girl off? Um
Well, she sued
which
them civilly in 2021, and then he
Mhm,
tried to get the case dismissed in the U.S., and they did not dismiss it. And then in 2022, Elizabeth stripped him of his military affiliations and royal patronages and said he couldn't use HRH anymore, even though he still
mhm,
retained it at that point. And
mhm.
then, like you said, she got the $16 million, but the details are still kind of, secret. And then Elizabeth died at the end of 2022, so he kind of lost his protector because she adored him. And
Mhm.
then, from then on, William and King Charles are in charge, and so. Um, in 2023, there wasn't a whole lot, but then it came back last week
Mhm.
when this memoir was posted, also with the Epstein files that have yet to be released. I think there's like some chatter around that, but since no one's seen them, we don't really know what's in them. So I'm not going to speculate on that. Um, and then they stripped him of his HRH title. When was that? Let's see, the 20th. So just a few days ago. No, the 30th. They
Yeah, it
stripped
was
him on the
yesterday.
20th. On the 20th, they stripped him of his Duke of York title. And then
Mhm.
on the 30th, they stripped him of his HRH title. Now tell us, and I know you know all the details of why that's so significant and why that never happens.
Yeah. So when he was stripped of the Duke of York title, well, if we go back, when he was told by the queen, you'll no longer use your HRH, you'll retain it, but you won't use it, and you're losing all of your like military honorary ranks and stuff like that, like regimental honorary colonels and what, I don't know if he was ever a colonel, but like his honorary ranks. That was seen as the queen is kind of doing the only thing that she personally could do without having to call into question birthright status, right? Everything that the monarchy is based on, and without having to call in parliament to act. Because in order to strip the Duke of York title, that has to be done by an act of parliament because the way that those titles are bestowed. And the only time a title has ever really been stripped by parliament is because somebody has been accused of treason, essentially, right? Like they do not take lightly to stripping a peer of their title. So he retained the Duke of York title because it was kind of assumed that it would be, to say that he has committed treason would be a step too far, perhaps. And to call parliament in to handle what is essentially the private matter of a very public family wouldn't be seen as like a good use of taxpayer resources. However, people began like really wanting to see him stripped of that title. I do also think that the royal family, they're hesitant to do things that rock the boat too much with that public perception of how easily can things be taken away from us, because if the public sees, oh look, you can just take a title away, you can just change a style or remove a style, that starts giving like, the anti-monarchists a lot of fuel to be like, hey, why is there any Duke of wherever, and why does anybody have an HRH? And if it's that easy to do, why don't we do it to everybody? So the queen kind of put the brakes on anything that was a major overhaul, but she did take away the ceremonial and honorary ranks that she personally had bestowed on him, that are seen as like a reward for good faith and action on behalf of the crown. She took those away. Then we fast forward to last week when it was announced that the Duke of York title would be removed. Um, and there was a little bit of confusion at the time because it said, he would no longer hold the Duke of York title. And that was a little bit of like, okay, is Parliament removing it? Is this just in line with the HRH situation where he won't use the title, but he still has the title? And it came out yesterday that no, Parliament is in the process of removing it. It has actually already been removed from I think it's called like the roll of peers, where it lists out like the entire peerage and who holds what titles and what order of precedence they're in. And the Duke of York title has already been removed from there because it is no longer being used. It's in abeyance, essentially. And so that was seen as like a really big step. And then to announce last night that, and this is why I think the story about the prostitutes in Thailand, it was published this morning on the Daily Mail at 5 a.m. And I think that Buckingham Palace must have got a heads up about it last night. And they were like, okay, this is just enough. Like, we're just done with this. Because to remove an HRH and a prince title means that they are removing his birthright. They're not, they're now saying, even though you are entitled to this just for the sake of being born, just because a certain line of DNA runs through your blood, we're going to take that back. There is no such thing anymore as a birthright that is irrevocable, which a lot, like, the public is extremely pleased by. But for the royal family, that is such a significant step because they're kind of like diminishing their, like ordained by God, one step above everybody status by saying we can take this away with the stroke of a pen. It's going to give the anti-monarchists a lot of fuel. But I do think that another factor in all of this, in addition to the potential that, the Buckingham Palace got wind of the fact that this article was coming out this morning and they were like, we just have to act. I do think it's possible that, and you had said this earlier, King Charles, he's been going through cancer treatment. He and the Princess of Wales, Kate, were diagnosed at roughly the same time, like within a week or two of each other. And we have heard that Kate is in remission. She's doing really well. We see her in public. The king, we have not heard an update about his status other than he is still undergoing treatment. He looks pretty healthy when we see him in public. He's still undertaking engagements. But there is the thought that the king may be a lot sicker than the public is aware of. And his reign has always been kind of seen as a transitional reign just because of his age and William's age. Obviously, Charles isn't going to reign for 50 years, 60 years, 80 years like his mother did. He's got at most 20, maybe 30. And with this cancer diagnosis, he really that looks like it may be a lot shorter.
Yeah, I think
And
he's
so
got a
there's
lot less than that, frankly.
yeah. And so there is the thought that Charles, knowing that his reign is a transitional reign and seeing the problems that this Andrew problem is causing and the perception of what it's doing to the royal family, where people are, kind of losing faith in the royal family's ability to police itself, he said, you know what, I'm just going to end this right now so that William does not have to deal with this, so that this whole situation does not carry over into the next generation. And it also gives the king a little bit of, positive press because it's seen as him taking like the decisive action that his mother wouldn't take. But then it also takes any sort of negative sentiment away from William, because there has in the press been a lot of like, William hates his uncle. He's gunning for his uncle to get his title taken away. William is the reason that Andrew is getting kicked out of Royal Lodge and off the Windsor estate. And so this kind of keeps William from looking like the bad guy, but also gives Charles the benefit of doing what the people seem to want, because people are very fickle with the royal family, right? Like, what's good for the goose isn't always good for the gander. And if one of them does something, like, for example, like Charles taking his brother's titles away is seen as like he's doing the right thing. He's taking decisive action. This is long overdue. If William did it at the start of his reign, whenever that may be, people might be like, "Oh, you're such a bully, like going after your elderly uncle." You know what I mean? And so Charles is kind of protecting William from having to deal with that part of the public perception by just dealing with it himself. Finally, is what the public are saying. Finally dealing with it. So, yeah, it's a
I
lot. It's
think
very
you're right.
significant.
I think that it would look churlish if William did it at the beginning of his reign,
Mhm.
and that Charles is trying to prevent that for him,
Mhm.
which I think that's admirable. And frankly, I do think that Andrew deserves to be stripped of at least his Duke of York title and his public persona, because no matter what, I mean, with the new breaking story today about the Thailand prostitutes, how well does it speak of the royal family that he's doing that?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
what does that say about him? What does that say about his persona, who he is as a person? I mean, I don't know a lot about prostitutes and I don't know a lot about trafficking, but I do know that, like, prostitution, I know that maybe sex workers, there's a lot of trauma involved. I don't know how many, really normal people with no childhood trauma become prostitutes. Maybe a lot. I don't know. I'm going to say that up front. I don't know. But I just feel like it's no matter what, no matter if they've chosen that profession or not, I just feel like there's something, um, you know, inherently wrong with taking advantage of a woman, even if you're paying
Y-
her.
Yeah, and I think that the bigger potential story in the Thai prostitutes situation isn't even necessarily the procuring of a prostitute, although it's like, come on, Andrew, you couldn't have just gone and met someone like organically. Like, are you that off-putting that you can't just build an organic one night stand on your own? But that there was 40 of them in 4 days, I think is really the kicker there, because that is kind of indicative of grossness. Like, just
Well, yeah.
like, not
I
because
mean,
it's
if
like
that's true,
prostitutes, just like
alleged, that's
40 partners in 4 days is like, ew. Ew, ew,
yeah.
ew.
In college, we called that a DP, um,
DP?
dirty P, dirty.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
I'm not going to say that
yeah.
word. Yeah. So if you knew in college that someone had slept with a lot of girls, if a boy had slept with a lot of girls, then you were like, yeah, no, he's got a DP. Not gonna mess with that. Um,
Yeah, like, it's
yeah.
just
I mean,
gross.
even boys
Even
can get
if
reputations, right?
yeah, for sure. Like, I don't know, call me a prude, I guess, but there can be a number that is too high for men or women, for anybody, like whoever. There is a point where it's like, okay, why so many? Why are we hitting dozens and dozens and dozens here? Like, this is disgusting. And to do
Well,
that in a period of 4 days is just a
okay. Well,
lot.
so I have to say, like, for all the women out there who are sex positive and want to have as much relations as they can with as many people as they can because they're sex positive or body positive or just enjoy it. Hey, I'm all for it for you. I think that is great. And I do not judge that whatsoever. Let them. That's a let them thing for me.
Let
However,
them, but not in 4 days.
but in 4 days, 40 prostitutes, 40
Yeah, that's just
Thai
a lot.
prostitutes.
And he was
I
on a taxpayer-funded trip. Like, this was a
Right.
business trip that the
Right. So the British
taxpayers
the
were
British
funding.
the British people paid for that.
Yeah, like,
If it's true, like, we don't
it's
know if it's true, right? Like, if the Daily Mail, haven't they been sued like 1,000 times because they, didn't actually get the story quite right?
yeah, so they're getting the story from a royal biographer, I believe. So they're just kind of they've attributed the story by name to somebody else. So they have that defense of, we're just reporting what someone is about to publish in a book or something like that. So they have that layer of security for themselves, but doesn't mean that. Andrew wouldn't go after the author that they're claiming is the one who is saying it. But
Yeah.
I also think that the Daily Mail, they get sued a lot, but they win a lot. You know,
Yeah.
if they're naming their source, it's kind of hard to say they've done anything wrong. Because
Well,
it's just like,
so
even if it's not true, they're like, well, we just printed what we were told. And here's the
here
person who told us.
here's the crux of the matter. Prince Andrew may not be a great guy, allegedly. He may have done many, many things over the course of 40 years that
Allegedly.
allegedly that does not speak well of him and does should not make him a prince of the realm of the United Kingdom or whatever. I just think that they did the right thing in taking his titles away and just let him go live out his life in obscurity and let's never hear anything else about him ever again, other than if we
Mhm.
have more tea to spill and we'll do it on this podcast. But
Yeah. And I do think it's significant too that he's being sent out to Sandringham, right? Like, there will be no more photos of him driving his car on the Windsor estate or riding his horse on the Windsor estate. Like, Sandringham, although not super far from London, I believe it's like I don't know actually. I was going to say it's like a 40-minute drive, but I don't know that to be true. It might be like a couple hours. But it's pretty private. Like, the entire estate is pretty private. It is a private residence. Sandringham is one of the privately owned residences of the monarch. So it is not part of the Windsor estate that is partially maintained by taxpayer funds. Any security that's provided is privately funded. You know, the maintenance and upkeep, all of that is privately funded by the monarch personally. So the fact that they're really just taking him out of any sort of association with the taxpayer and then also sending him, they didn't just like buy him an apartment in London, right? They weren't like, okay, here, this is your new place. They're sending him like to somewhere where the press theoretically will not even be able to get a photo of him because they just want him out of the public eye and they're done with it. And the fact that they said, and I get, we don't know the ins and outs of it, but Sarah will have to find her own arrangement. Does that mean that she has been forbidden from living with him? Or could they continue their arrangement and the royal family is just saying, we're not giving them two houses? Because it was being said earlier in the week that Sarah and Andrew were trying to get a house each. And then it, the release came out yesterday saying he'll be moving to a private residence on the Sandringham estate. Sarah will find her own accommodation. Maybe her accommodation is with Andrew. Like, maybe they continue living together because I doubt he's going to be stuck in like a 1-bedroom cottage. He's probably going to be okay because the other residences on the Sandringham estate are also quite large. But I think that's really significant as well. They're like sending him into exile.
Yeah, they are, but I don't think it's fair that Sarah goes into exile, honestly.
And she may not. She's free to find her own accommodation. So her daughters still have their residences. Beatrice has an apartment at St. James. Eugenie has I believe she lives in a cottage on the Kensington Palace grounds. And then Beatrice also has a home in the Cotswolds. Eugenie has a home in Portugal. Um, so it's possible that Sarah stays in London and she may stay with one of her daughters. She may buy an apartment. I think at one point she did own an apartment in London, although she may have sold it in the last couple of years because that kind of is like ringing a bell in my head. But she may not disappear. She may stay in the public eye and strike up some brand deals and try to do her own thing. But part of what has happened in the last couple of weeks is that what seems to have kicked all of this off is that there was an email found or released from Sarah apologizing to Jeffrey Epstein for saying publicly that she regretted being friends with him and that she was like distancing herself from him. And in this email, she was, apologizing for doing that and saying, you've always been I believe the words she used were a supreme friend. And people were like, wait a second, you guys were supposed to have cut off ties with him. And instead, you're like apologizing to him after he had been convicted of sex trafficking. Like, you're apologizing to him for publicly saying you were no longer going to have anything to do with him. What is going on? Um, and so Sarah is kind of what kicked off this like round of everything coming back to the forefront, because she turns out didn't cut off ties when they had originally said that they did. So who knows? Who knows how this is going to turn out?
Well, it's hot goss for us and fun to spill the tea on the royal family because we haven't really had anything in a long time. So,
Mm.
we do enjoy a little gossip about the royals. Well, I think that's going to be it for us today. If something else breaks today, we'll jump back on and amend. But otherwise, we're going to push this episode out. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We're back